So good morning, and thank you for taking time this morning to join us on this quick Digital 30 session. Today's objective really is to give you a view of where we are as an organisation and how we're supporting our customer base in achieving a true multi-cloud service delivery model. But just before we go into the how, I think we'll just take a little bit of time to sort of step back and have a look at the market as it stands. As we all know, digital transformation is on the top of the hype cycle. It's used in every email that you get, and obviously, hopefully those emails will lessen over the next couple of weeks as the GDPR regulation comes in and changes the way people communicate. But nevertheless, all of us are in a position where digital is changing the way in which we have to operate as an organization. And statistically, we're seeing major changes in relation to the impact of that within CIOs, within their organizations, and the change that's happening from that perspective. And also the disruption that that's causing when you start to think about things like the cloud market space and how that's been used heavily within organizations to drive digital change. So with those forces that are affecting that, we're seeing this cloud adoption and cloud transformation as being a key part to that. And if you look at the cloud market and actually think back 10 years, it's actually been an emerging market for over 10 years now, probably in its 11th year. Back 10 years ago, there were three things really that were talked about in relation to cloud: flexibility, security, and commercial agility. And they're things that have been critical to people in their adoption of SaaS and infrastructure as a service and other pieces over the past 10 years. But actually what we're now seeing is a big change in the market in relation to why people are using cloud, why they're using it as part of their digital transformation. And we summarize that really, I guess, into three core areas. The first area is in relation to a new generation of users, consumers, the millennials, the Minecraft generation, the Generation Z, whichever kind of way you want to look at it. But these are people who are cloud natives who are within our organizations, and the latest reports say that in the next 2 years, over 51% of organizations will have millennials as their core user base. And if you look at this, this affects us in two ways: an internal way and an external factor. The internalization of that is, how do we attract the best talent to come and work for our organization? How do we ensure that we have the best people who work for us? And those folk are attracted by the capabilities, the service, the offerings, the way in which we operate as an organization. And that's really key. And you see that often in the technology that organizations are starting to provide out to their consumers and their customers internally in relation to being able to have accessibility, move away from using email, move into a more social-based context, having the right type of tools and capabilities to support that. So the internalization factor is, how do we make sure we have the best people? Because inevitably, companies are successful by the people who work for them and the talent that's delivered as part of that. If you then look at the externalized factor of that, is how is our organization going to deal with this new millennial type of user, the Minecraft generation, who are focused on everything being video, everything having accessibility here now and capabilities available within that space. So, when you start to think about that, we need to also factor in how we use technology to drive that. The second force then is data. As we digitalize, as we create more data, we want to turn more data into deeper insight. How can we use data more effectively as an organization to change the way we work, interact, sell, support, innovate with our customers and support them in their change and their organizational model? And the third major factor that we see is then competition. And this is those organizations that are rapidly changing the way that the market works, and typically end up being millennial-based organizations or users who use data more effectively to change the way they interoperate and build new businesses. And if you look at the size and growth, many of us will work for organizations who may have spent 10 or 20 years building ourselves to the size we are today. And then you look at an organization like a £50 billion Airbnb who's been here a couple of years and has gone absolutely crazy in relation to their expansion. And the final piece linked to competition is obviously the way in which data and digital is changing the way that we integrate and operate with companies. And this is where you can see the old chap from the Go Compare advert. And what I mean by this is the intermediaries, those who sit between us and our customers, who build technology and build data and build information models to find a new way to interoperate and integrate with a millennial Minecraft generation. however you want to look at it, to be the broker between us and our customers. So with that in mind, we have a tough challenge, within our office of our CIO, when we're talking to our customers, when we're working with innovation, when we're talking to the chief digital officer of the business, we have some challenges. And if you look at IT from a historic view, I've done 17 years working, I guess, with organizations and been lucky enough to spend almost the majority of my time always with customers and seeing it. I think IT has had this difficult and hard rap from the business for many years. We've been slow, we've not been agile, we've not been able to do all these things. The reality is that the IT departments have been the core foundation of actually delivering technology innovation. But the problem was that years ago, as we deployed these type of historical architectures, they weren't designed to interoperate and integrate the way that they are today. So what then happens is you find this shadow IT emergence where people start going out to the external market and business units, and they might start sneaking in a bit of Amazon, they might sneak in a bit of Azure, they might sneak in a bit of some other third party, for example. They might start sharing data through third-party applications as opposed to through your central system. They might start doing all the collaboration and messaging via WhatsApp. These are the kind of pieces. But I think the reality is that we're in an amazing position now where the office of the CIO and the technology leadership is now in an amazing position where these system services and integrations are massively API rich now, and it gives us an amazing opportunity to become internal service providers within our own right within our business, to be able to deliver innovation to our business and to the organization within that. And actually, it's not a case of saying no to technology, not saying no to people using these. What we want to do is support the CIO's office and the team in actually being able to enable those, but actually enable them in a governance and a structured way that allows much more flexibility for you and your organization moving down the track. And we call this the enablement of the internal service provider, or the rebirth of the internal service provider, and that's where our focus is. So when you then look at that, then the complexity comes is, okay, so we know we can do this, we know that the APIs are open, we know that there are platforms out there that have been massively widely adopted and growing into billion-dollar companies overnight. But where do we go? Do we go into a private cloud architecture? We look at hyper-converged as a perfect example. The second fastest growing market area in the moment in cloud is a consolidation of private cloud into a appliance-based architecture. So something that's available, and rapidly growing. Do we go into a community cloud, like, for example, Exponential-e shared cloud, which has got banks and legal firms and such, but it's not a public cloud, it's non-consumable over the internet in the same way that a public cloud is that anyone can log on to and create accounts? Or do you go pure public? Or do we do a hybrid of that? But then we need to consider our application landscape and think about that and say, well, actually, our COTS applications, common off-the-shelf applications, do we keep them within our data center, in our private community or public cloud? Or do we SaaS enable them? Do we move them to SaaS? Do we create a version? Do we move them to the SaaS version of that and externalize that outside of the data center? But for my in-house developed applications, what do I want to do to refactor those applications to move them into a more platform as a service based architecture, where the infrastructure is then abstracted and we're in a position where we can deliver those rapidly in a much more agile way? And you think back to the slide a minute ago, Uber, Airbnb, Netflix, Tesla, all of these organizations deliver and develop all of their applications now in a pure platform as a service based architecture, where the applications are truly cloud native. So what we want to do is make sure we can support our customers in picking the right place and giving them accessibility to those, helping them with their SaaSification program, bit of a made up word, but focusing on that, and also helping them to build a vision around how they rebuild their applications over time to make them much more malleable in a public cloud or in a multi-cloud context. And the key then, though, is also then thinking about compliance and governance and structure that sits around that. So to make sure that we support our customers with that as well, we invest heavily in BSI and our ISO accreditation. And we're lucky enough to have recently got our 8th accreditation, which is 10,012, which is focused on data protection, which is a nice linkage to all this GDPR activity that's going on. But the point is, what we want to focus on, going back to that key word, is how we enable the internal service provider. How do we provide that power of one to the central internal service provider, that they have the ability to use and consume these services? So to give you a bit of a view of what we've been working on and on what we're going to be able to enable for our customers, I want to talk to you now through the innovation that we've been working on in the background, and that we will have our full official release in early July coming for, that people will be able to start to consume these services. So what we've been working on in the heart of Exponential-e, integrated into our software-defined WAN, integrated into our CSOC, integrated into our managed and platform services and professional services, is our CMP, our cloud management platform. The CMP basically has a fully integrated link to our ServiceNow and service governance process, but put simply, allows a customer to create and visualize and view all of their cloud services through one simple interface, and have, if they wish, all of their bills through one single one bill model, have all their SLAs and performance seen in one simple place, and ability to change and migrate services between multiple clouds. So what that really looks like, and hopefully you'll be able to see the animations that are now coming, is within that service, what you can basically do through the portal is have accessibility to see all of the cloud services that you have, and link them together. So this could be active clouds that are in the public domain, it could be private clouds that you have on premise, or it could be public clouds, for example. What we're able to do through this is link those all together through that one interface and give you the geographical deployment capability with that. So where we have our own multi-tenant cloud, our multi-tenant cloud is visible and accessible through here. Where a customer has their own private cloud, same. And where the customer wants to expand their services to be able to provide a global capability, that can be done as well. The service is massively feature rich, of course. What it allows you to do is to have significant volume of management controls and policies that sit around that. So you can also start to do effective information lifecycle management with your systems, services, applications, and capabilities, such that you can configure the exploration management of your services. So if you want to have your services in a position where you provide them to a business unit for a project for 30 days and they ought to expire, you can control that. All of the governance sits around four core roles focused on a procurement role, an infrastructure architect role, a governance and management role, as in a in-life day 2 operations role, and then read-only. And those roles can be customized to support and deliver the value that's needed around those. The premise, though, is that you can put a structure in place where you can have that end-to-end lifecycle management through one single interface. If you then start to think about what we can then do, is we can then integrate private cloud to that. So we recently launched our hyper-converged architecture, which is our basically cloud in a box model. And you'll see some press releases going out about that imminently that sit around what we've been working on there. So if we deploy a private cloud architecture down to a customer's estate on-premise in their data centers or in our data centers or in a worldwide location, we can have that standard architecture model that can be delivered in a sort of t-shirt based model integrated back through into the centralized CMP. So now what you're able to do not only is provide capability and services down to the public cloud and automate all of those, but through one central interface, you can then also visualize your private cloud. Why this is really cool is that if you have an existing infrastructure that's been provided, you've bought yourself or you've had through another third party for a period of time, what we can also do is hook in your existing private cloud architecture. So if you have a VMware, for example, based architecture, what we can immediately do is plug this service into your existing infrastructure and immediately, as you can see from here, visualize all of your resources, the virtual machines, containers, application services, IPs, controls, sizing, all of those things through one interface. What that allows us to do is to think about how can we commercialize your on-premise infrastructure that you've pre-invested in into a model where suddenly that is a new actual cloud platform from a commercial perspective that allows you to automate, deploy, and manage costs and resources down to there. Why I think that's really important is if you think the context of having multiple cloud services is if you then have services that are out in the public domain, for example, or in our shared cloud or another platform that was provided by us, and you can see that your resource and on-premise infrastructure or pre-investment is only 60% utilized, what you can do is control spend more effectively. So the aim is, the service will give a visualization to you to be able to see all of your platforms all in one space. What then bolts onto that is that we want to try and focus on speed, automation, and integration. So within the core platform, we also have the process of a blueprint factory. Blueprint factory basically is a way in which you, as a consumer of the service, or via our professional services teams, can create blueprints of your core application landscapes and automate the delivery of those. So what you start to have now is not only ability to deploy multiple cloud infrastructure platforms through one interface and get one bill, one service model, one SLA. What you can also do is deliver your private cloud and integrate your existing infrastructure or ones we provide and create application automation. So here's a good example of that. So within the system and service, again, something that can be done either by yourselves or by our professional services team, what you can actually do is start to build out templates and blueprints. So this is just an example of a legal application that we were creating the other day. Typical 3-tier architecture, app layer, database layer, and a messaging layer. What you're able to do is create that and then attach that to core builds that are already there. So for example, Tomcat, MySQL, or for example, RabbitMQ or something like that. So what you can start to do is see how you can structurally build up your application. What you can then start to do is then create sequencing of that. So what boots first, what's controls around there. Obviously, if you've got some existing applications or you've got some pre-scripts that you've built for some of those, you can integrate those. So for example, if you had some Puppet or Chef scripts that you wanted to integrate, you can pull them in and do that. But what's really interesting also is you can then start to select where you want to deploy those and what the permissions are around them and what the sizing are. As an example, it might be that your corporate policy is that anything that's got the data on or the back-end data needs to sit within your data center. So you have already connected in your private cloud, like we showed in the last slide. Then you deploy your database end to the back-end infrastructure in your own platform, but then put the front end of that, for example, in a hyperscale platform where you might want to use something like AWS to be able to do that with global load balancing or something. Once you've created your application, you have basically within your apps catalog, and you could, for example, do this with all of your dev and test workloads. So you could actually say, well, I've already got templates. I can just fire them up, do some testing on them for 48 hours on AWS and shut them down. So you start to get that flexibility around how you consume the services. But what this allows you to do is think about how much automation you can do either yourself or with our support to be able to increase the speed, the volume, the velocity of capabilities that you can provide within those environments. And obviously it's not limited to a 3-tier architecture. You know, we were looking at some PaaS platforms the other day, and those PaaS platforms are made up of about 27, 28 VMs, you know, loads of scripting, config, etc. And we're able to automate all of that and then deliver that anywhere. So if you have some of your own applications that you may want to look at reselling, there's also an opportunity downstream for you to build those and put them into an app store context so that other customers that we have potentially could take those as services as an inbuilt PaaS or SaaS model from within the platform. So what we've seen there is kind of how it couples together, but just to sort of visualize that sort of on one page, what we're basically saying is you have a basket. You can take some AWS, you could take some Exponential-e services, you could take some Azure cloud services, visualize, see that, get one bill, get one operational model, manage and control that through one interface. You could then link in private cloud, either yours or new private cloud infrastructures, hyperconverged infrastructures that we provide to you. You can then automate your application landscapes, create blueprints of those, or start to build out new apps and new services. You can standardize or not standardize. You might want to go VMware, you might want to go Hyper-V. And that allows you then to build up your blueprint architecture. So if you were thinking of actually like a model office architecture or an expansion plan where you want to roll out into a new country, all of this could be automated such that you could deploy it into an Azure zone or an Amazon zone. You know, we're a CSP for Azure, so we can support you with all of that. And we have all the accreditation and the service capability around that. We're a consulting partner with AWS. We recently got up to a new tier, I think yesterday, on that tier structure that sits around that, so we can help you there as well. And downstrack we'll have Alibaba and Google and a couple of others that sit within there. But where really, in my opinion, you know, the rubber hits the road is we can do all this, we can control this, we put the policy in, it feels really good. But what we want to also do is optimize in life. And the big thing that's been missing in life, I think, is optimization of these platforms. So within the service, what we have is the ability for you as a consumer of that to be able to run and understand more about your landscapes. So if you want to understand what's your total footprint, like a CI or CMDB based view, of all your platforms, again, we can give you a centralized view of all of the platforms that you connect in, or we connect in for you, 26 clouds, 55 hosts as an example in this. And actually we can start to see the utilization of that at a group level across all of those things. But actually we might want to look at some analytics on the platform. Here's a good example of spend. This one's showing that 56% of spend is on Amazon. When you start to plug in all the stats of your different services, you can say, well, I've got these 50 accounts that we're using with Azure or Amazon or Expo or whoever it is. And actually the aggregated spend of them is really interesting when I analyze them. But where the real value, I think, comes also is in automation and action and guidance. The platform will automatically understand changes that happen in the public cloud space, for example, around tariff structures. So if you have a tariff structure, for example, that you build an application into, that originally the application needed, I don't know, 4 vCPU and 8 gig of RAM, and the closest match was a box that had 4 vCPU and 10 gig of RAM. The platform will automatically know if a new release of a VM comes out or a blueprint, and give you a recommendation to that to say, actually, you could change from A to B. If you change from A to B, the saving would be $1,000 a month or £1,000 a month, or whatever region you're deploying in. What we also are building into this, and it links back to the conversation about ServiceNow, is that it will allow you, it will automatically create change requests for you in ServiceNow. What I mean by that is, in this scenario here, where we can see that these particular VMs need an increase in size because we can see historical trends where they're hitting CPU, it will raise a change request into the change management system. Do you want to authorize this change? If you authorize that change, it'll automatically query against what your change window is. And from a change window perspective, will then, if you allow it to, automatically make that actionable update for you. Or again, something that can be provided as a service operational model if we provide, different layers of the service depending on where that is. When you start to think about this also, where it gets into a real nice space is where it's telling you to decrease, right? Where you can optimize your spend and make good savings there. Typically from experience and talking to various different organizations who specialize around guidance, analytics, and optimization, most organizations who have a good footprint in a public cloud platform can often yield 25 to 35% savings immediately in relation to right sizing and management of their workloads. So for you, if you have those existing Amazon Azure accounts, what we can do is novate those accounts under our central model, provide you with that one single service for it, one bill across all of those platforms, one operational model, and give you that true visualization of service. And we think when you couple that with the network, the software-defined WAN and the extensibility of that, plus the CSOC and security services, it really gives our customers that internal service provider model, which means that they have the ability to offer the business these different services, control the governance and access around that, and manage them really effectively. And if you think of it then around the global reach of that, we start to get excited about, like, what does that mean in relation to footprint? So we have AWS availability zones that sit literally worldwide, and these are all expanding as we speak. When you look at Google has its own structure that sits around there. So if you're starting to look at things like a lot of work that's going on at the moment with things like containerization, and Kubernetes is often living in Google because of the invention of the technology and how the linkage is there. But there's some really good plays in relation to that. Azure, another example, and placement of those services. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be bringing on more services to this, so in a centralized model. So again, you don't have to have downstream. Once you don't have to have an account with Amazon, you don't have to have an account with Azure, you don't have to have an account with Alibaba or Google or whoever. You can have a central model via Expo that gives you that central management plane into all of those platforms and delivers that as one bill. And obviously we have our Expo zones within here as well, which are our private locations as well, and extensibility to deploy worldwide for private architectures as well that sits around that. Just from a release perspective, just as a bit of a view, we've got lots of stuff that's tracking down, but the point really here, rather than taking too much of the time, is that there is a strong roadmap that sits around that, and that roadmap is designed to drive that forward and help move that forward from that perspective. But our core approach here is to drive these digital transformation and innovation activities that sit around that and help the IT department move from a model which was traditional, where they assessed, designed, procured, built, and installed those systems and services, take them away from a model where they have to consider which cloud, and actually help drive that as a power of one model that centralizes and delivers all of those services. So we mentioned before around the CMP being in the central part of that, gives you that accessibility over all of these cloud platforms. We then take that and introduce the software-defined WAN. Software-defined WAN then extends down into those cloud platforms and provides that linkage into those and extends the network within that, rather than having to have lots of different connections and services that sits around that. We then put the CSOC around that, the Security Operations Center, that then wraps itself automatically and links in and puts that wrap around all of those services to be able to give that linkage of the BSI and the accreditation around that. We then map in managed services, service desk that sit around that. So if you want support and services to manage your AWS or your Azure or those pieces, we can take that as well. The Blueprint Factory then links them all together and gives that automation of applications, for example, a big data app down to your private cloud, or provides automation of UC, for example, out to an endpoint end user side of things. But all of those pieces together really help to drive that transformation, and we've supported a large volume of customers in that transformation journey over the past 2 years, for example, with petabytes worth of data and VMs migrated, and 27,000 plus Office 365 migrations. But the real end piece is driving this digital transformation innovation and having this wrapper services that sit around that to help our customers in that journey, to support that. And then really, as we move forward from that, we're just trying to then help to visualize the next generation and what's happening next. If you think back, any of us perhaps should remember the DOS days where we were launching games or doing business from DOS windows. And then, we evolved into this GUI-based architecture, which still exists today. This GUI that sits around how we then interact. And, Windows 10, for example, is now seen as something that's getting close to iOS in relation to accessibility and usability and the feature and the feature richness of that. But then as you sort of move forward from that, we get this mobile and touch generation that's come, the third transformation, if you like, where we started in, I guess it's 8 years ago, moved into now the iPhone and the technology that sits around that. But the millennials is the device of the millennial, really. But I think the core thing we have to think about now is within the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see the augmented reality and mixed reality come and hit our businesses so massively that you're seeing it already just in the standard applications that people are using. But we have to be prepared for that and have platforms, technology, and services to underpin that by building a multi-cloud architecture like we've suggested, by integrating the CMP into that to give you that federation. The accessibility of those technologies as they come to life will be very easy for us to consume, and that really allows us then to have that kind of peace of mind as a service model in life, that we've got a reference architecture and platform model that gives us flexibility. We've got our integrated network and security to support that, but we're ready to innovate, and we're ready to have an operational model for us that as an internal service provider, that being you can pick and choose the services that you have and give your business the agility and flexibility that they need.